Thanks everyone who took the time to join us for this session. Today we're going to be covering best practices for use of open source libraries in cloud-based development. Myself, you have Rami Sass here from WhiteSource, and joining me today is our guest Corrigan Brown, who is the co-founder of Project Locker. During our session, we're going to be talking about open source management practices, and I will present that part of the presentation. I will then turn things over to Corrigan, who will talk about software development in the cloud, and then do a quick demo of what the Project Locker WhiteSource integration looks like and what value it can add to your R&D practices and free up your resources for other more important things. We have a lot of people in this session, so we're not going to take answers live. So I ask you, if you have any questions, please type them in the control bar, and we will send you an email with the full answers to all of your questions in the next few days. And with that, I will start by telling you about open source management in general. So as probably all of you know, open source is great. Everyone uses open source very extensively. You can't realistically produce competitive commercial software today without relying very heavily on open source components. You don't want to reinvent the wheel, and you much rather take something that's already tried and tested. However, there are a couple of issues that prevent developers from enjoying the full benefits of open source with peace of mind. We identify two main such issues. One is the security and quality of the open source components, and second is the licensing and legal risk that derives from the existence of the open source licenses and the terms of use that come along with the open source components. And these challenges combined can reduce the value of the R&D team and the entire company from the open source that they are using. Here at WhiteSource, we offer a service that can help you make the value of open source whole again and enjoy the full benefit without suffering from any of the penalties. We provide an accurate, real-time reporting system and monitoring system of all the open source libraries and their licenses currently being used, and as they are added to your open source inventory during application development. We provide proactive alerts on security vulnerabilities and bug fixes and new versions of open source libraries that you are using, and we automatically enforce best practices for effective open source management. All in the cloud in a very easy to use and intuitive SaaS solution that's accessible to companies of all sizes. From security and quality perspective, you can get proactive alerts on vulnerabilities that affect your inventory. You get alerts when releases of libraries that you're using go out into the market, and we help you manage and clean your code base throughout the development lifecycle. From a legal perspective, you can get automatic documentation of all the existing open source inventory, identify all of your licenses, including the licenses of the dependencies, which is usually a very difficult issue to handle because a lot of dependencies can come with their own licensing and terms, and they're not necessarily complying with the licensing terms of the original library that brought them along. And you can automatically enforce your policy based on your own organizational categories of which open source libraries you want and which you would rather not use in your own product. All of this is done completely automatically. We have a very wide range of plugins. Corrigan is going to talk about how this is achieved automatically combined with the Project Locker environment in a couple of minutes. The nice thing is that it takes the developers completely out of the legal loop and lets them go back to their coding and the tasks that are important to them, and not waste developer time on reading licenses and drilling into dependencies and trying to research open source issues that they don't care about. And you can define your organizational policies, not necessarily yourself, but someone in the organization, maybe the legal counsel or the manager, can decide what the policy is, and the system just automatically enforces it on the inventory and on your ongoing processes. And with that, I'm going to hand things over to Corrigan, who will take it from here. Give me 1 second.
All right, thanks, Rami. Let me just get my screen going here. All righty. So there we are. All right. So I'm Corrigan Brown. I'm co-founder at Project Locker. And I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about what Project Locker is and then how Project Locker and White Source work together for your project, which is developing custom code using open source components. So first off, a Project Locker, what is it? We were founded in 2003. We are basically cloud applications for software developers. So you're looking at things like revision control, which is Subversion or Git, issue tracking, which we do with Track, and build and deploy, which is a combination of custom things that we've built and tools like hosted Jenkins, build server. So we're focused on development and release in the software development lifecycle. That's where we spend most of our time and energy, and that's where we deliver the most value to teams. We have over 100,000 users in over 100 countries. We have teams all around the world using Project Locker, and we also have multinational teams using Project Locker where they'll have people in the United States, the Ukraine, and India all working together to deliver software. So before the cloud, things were a little different. Teams were always behind firewall walls, or they were working in silos, so your division in San Francisco couldn't really talk with your division in New York. Basic revision control was expensive to do. It didn't work across distances, or it was very difficult to set up. User management, even once you had your system installed, was difficult. And the end result is things that are hard, your teams don't do. They would work around it, maybe copy files and do backups and things that in the end lead to more unreliability and more problems. But they did it because it was hard. It was easier to do it that way than the correct way. So open source software enters the picture over the past decade, 15 years, and starts to change the environment. So tools like Subversion, which is actually originally an open source project, that's a centralized revision control system. It lets you manage complex permissions in a pretty straightforward way, and it works over both SSH and HTTPS. So it works securely over internet protocols and through proxies. So a lot of times what that means for you in practice is you don't have to get your network team involved just to get your system installed and get it working with a team that's remote. Git is also another kind of revision control. Its model is a little different. Git is a distributed revision control system. The expectation is you have a federated team, that there's no central system of record. People work on their own. And so it supports offline and federated work very well. It also works over internet protocols. It can be served over HTTPS or SSH. The difference between Git and Subversion is it has a weaker notion of permission. So for larger teams or enterprises that have complex user management, Git may be a less desirable choice, even though it's better at branching and merging than Subversion. Then also on top of these tools, you have open source components. So open source components are just free libraries that have been developed that you can add to your projects to deliver tremendous value. So if you think about the Apache project and HTTP components, which mean you don't have to write an HTTP client or anything like that. You think about the Ruby gems, which make Ruby on Rails much more powerful, the Python egg that lets you do things in Django or other Python environments. So there are all these components in multiple languages that people are drawing on and using as force multipliers. So their team can focus on what they're specializing in rather than focus on reinventing the wheel and rewriting the basics. So this is great. This is a brave new world. It's wonderful. We have these new solutions, but we also have some problems that get introduced when you go open source. Who's going to manage it? Just because the software is free doesn't mean it's free to own it. It still takes time and effort to stand that system up, to manage it. Will my company let me run it in-house? Policies and restrictions may mean that it's difficult to procure and install software. You may need new equipment. You may need to buy hardware to run that software. Again, even if the software itself is free, the management and the total cost of ownership is not free. On top of that, how do I work with external contractors, right? How do you open these tools up, make sure that they are securely available to your contractors and your partners and to no one else? Are the OSS components I'm using safe? It's great to have these force multiplier libraries, but how can I be sure that security vulnerabilities don't open up and expose me somewhere down deep in my product? And last but not least, do my licenses match? So as you know, there are licenses like Apache and MIT, which basically just say, as long as you attribute it, we don't really care what you do. There are licenses like GPL, which are very aggressive and go, if you put this in, you're going to need to GPL whatever you put it in, depending on how you install it. So you want to know before you release software and expose yourself and customers to risk and liability that the licensing matches and that everything is current. So Project Locker can help with a large part of this. So what Salesforce.com does in the cloud for sales teams, that's what Project Locker does for development teams. We let you connect securely from anywhere. We let you work with remote teams in real time. We have a web-based interface for user management and things like that. Our main goal is to support and manage this tool infrastructure and take that headache away from you so that you can focus on what you do best, writing the software for your industry, delivering a fantastic product. We also can help with the build and release process. We talk primarily on our website about the source control and revision management process, but we can help with build and release as well, and that's what we're going to show a little bit of in the demo. So now I'm going to switch screens here, and I'm going to go to the demonstration. So what you should see is right now you'll see a browser, and this is the Project Locker portal. I'm already logged in. You can see this activity stream tells me recent things that developers have been doing. I can like or comment. So what it allows is your developers can collaborate organically and in real time. As check-ins are happening, I can see, okay, this is what this person's doing. Let me make a comment. Let me see things. Now, also, we have, I'm not going to go through the entire portal. I'm going to focus on the part that is relevant to the white source integration. So here I can see my projects. I have multiple projects. I can assign different permissions on these projects to different users. And then I can go as well to a code browser. I can go directly to Subversion, get my Subversion URL to put into any apps that are using Project Locker. I can also go to Track. And so I've already opened these windows just for smoothness. But so when I go to Track, what I see here is a source browser, among other things. I mean, Track has a lot of features around ticket management, letting you add information, track bugs on your project. And that's integrated with our Subversion and Git as well. So when you update things in Track, or when you update things in Subversion, you can make notifications on tickets as well. But again, we're focused on source code today. So this is the ActiveMQ project. It's an open source project from Apache. It has a lot of components, as you can see. We've checked those components in. If I click here, what I'll see is I can see the details of the code. This is a POM. It's a POM.xml from Maven. So things aren't highlighted, but there is syntax highlighting for raw source code. So if I had a Java file open or something like that, you would see syntax highlighting that will make it easier to read. I can also see revision history. So when I click, I'm going to go back here. When I click on the revision log link, that gives me the revision history of this project. So I can see, okay, someone's made some changes to a couple of the library versions and check those in. I can also see a diff. I can see exactly where those changes happen in the file. And if I had multiple files, I can do that by change set, so I can see all the things that were changed at the same time, or I can view it by file. So this is how Project Locker lets you get a better view on your code. Again, all of this is over HTTPS, and so if you have the correct usernames and passwords, you can get at this from anywhere in the world. And if you have proxies that allow you to browse the web, you have proxies that will allow you to see Project Locker. So now we're going to take a look at how we tie these two together. WhiteSource has a Jenkins integration. So this is Jenkins that we're hosting on one of our servers. And WhiteSource has a Jenkins integration that will, on each build, send updates of what's happening in the libraries in that build to WhiteSource. So I've got the ActiveMQ project set up here. I'm going to show you the configuration file, what would happen if I were to click basically in here. So I can see that I can set up source code management. I can point my Jenkins at a subversion. If you were running your own Jenkins, this would still apply. This is the part of standard Jenkins functionality. I can just simply point it at Project Locker. I've already configured credentials in Jenkins. Going back here briefly, Jenkins supports me setting up credentials on a per server basis. So I can set up my Project Locker, a build username and password, and store that securely there. When I go down to the bottom here, I can see that the WhiteSource publisher is expecting a particular product name, and I can tell it to check policies on build or simply do the analysis of the libraries on build. So I've already run this build because this is the ActiveMQ build. As you've seen, it's a quite large project. It takes about 15 minutes to run. So in the interest of time, everyone's time, and just kind of making this demo run smoothly, I've already run it. And so now we can look into WhiteSource after this build has been run from Project Locker and see what we see. We can see there's a lot of things that we're learning about the ActiveMQ project that could possibly impact us. We see that there are a few outdated, we see there are a number of outdated libraries, but there are also some libraries with identified security vulnerabilities. So that's an opportunity for us to patch. So we can go, okay, the Commons Client 1.2 has a security vulnerability. I can click here and see more about the vulnerability. I can then find out which version has that fixed and update my libraries to use that new version. I can update my Maven POM to use that new version. One of the other things that we can see here in a little more detail is you can just see all of the things that have happened. So in addition to security vulnerability, we can see, hey, there's some newer versions of these libraries out. We may want to upgrade to Spring 4. That may have implications, so you don't want to just swap things out blindly, but at least now you know that there's a new release out. There's an opportunity for me to make sure that my code is current, secure, and ready to use. I can also see multiple library versions. I've been using 2.9 in one project, so I'm using 2.11 in another project. So as you can see, WhiteSource is calling out a lot of things regarding security and obsolescence. One of the other big things that WhiteSource does for you is on the licensing side. I can see an entire breakdown of every library I'm using and scroll through that and see which licenses they are. So if I know that I don't want to run any GPL code, I can go through here and I can identify which libraries are GPL and talk to my development team and figure out how to swap those out. So again, this kind of protection will ultimately protect your customers if there are licensing issues down the road that are incompatible, and also protect you and make sure that you're releasing code that you can stand behind. So the final thing I want to point out before we go back is this runs on every build. So if you have your own Jenkins server set up with WhiteSource, or you're set up with one of the other WhiteSource plugins that integrate to a CI system, or if you're running hosted Jenkins at Project Locker, every time you run a build, WhiteSource will be updated with security information, obsolescence information, and licensing information. So that's near real-time updating. Alerts can be sent to go out. You can set up policies as well, so that whenever licensing comes in that's not compliant with your legal policies, you'll get an alert. So you can proactively manage this code base. And that ends up, in the end, you end up saving a lot of time and a lot of money. Your code is more secure, and you and your customers are happier. So that is pretty much everything I wanted to show in the demo. Just to wrap up, I'm going to bring up the slideshow again. So just to wrap up, we manage your source code and issues. WhiteSource manages your security and licensing, or identifies security, licensing, and obsolescence issues. And with the two together, you know that your code is safe, secure, accessible from anywhere, and current. And that is the advantage that Project Locker and WhiteSource together bring you. And back to you, Raman.
Right. Thank you very much, Corrigan, for a very informative presentation. For now, I think that's it. I see that we do have a couple of minutes, so why don't I just quickly go over the questions that I can answer. We have someone asking about .NET examples, so yeah, you can contact us directly, and we'll show you how the system works with .NET. We also have someone asking about, will this video be available online for later viewing? So the answer again is yes. We will send everyone an email with a link to the video of the demonstration and the presentation online, so you can access. You can also share with others who might be interested. There's a question here about other languages in terms of, not just English. So I'm sorry, currently we only support the English language in the product and the service, and the rest are more technical, so I guess we'll just have to pick them up in the Q&A document that we will send everyone. So I appreciate everyone's time, taking the time to be with us today. I want to thank Corrigan again for his great presentation, and I hope to see you all soon. So thank you very much.
All right.
And
thanks for having me, Ronnie.
it's our pleasure. And I guess we'll just wrap it up.